the cold barrel of a suppressed pistol pressed into Lucia Barbieri's cheek, trapping her against the damp concrete of a Chicago parking garage. Two hitmen smiled, thinking the curvy assistant was a helpless, soft target. They were dead wrong. The ruthless mafia kingpin, stepping from the shadows, would make sure of it. Lucia Barbieri knew the numbers did not lie. Sitting at her desk on the 42nd floor of a gleaming high-rise in the Chicago Loop, the soft glow of her monitors illuminated a truth that was about to get her killed. As an executive assistant at a front company for maritime logistics, Lucia was used to being invisible. Men in tailored suits often looked past her plus-size figure, dismissing her as just another background detail, a girl with soft curves and a quiet demeanor who ordered their coffee and filed their reports. They never realized she was the only one holding their chaotic operations together. Tonight, her sharp mind had unraveled a fatal error. Someone was skimming from Roland Kessler. Roland Kessler was not a man you stole from. He was the vicious architect behind the Iron Cross Syndicate, a sprawling German-American criminal empire that controlled the ports from the Great Lakes down to the Rust Belt. He was known for skinning traitors alive, and Lucia had just discovered that her boss, a sweaty middle-management embezzler, had been siphoning Kessler's money and had attached Lucia's digital signature to the falsified ledgers. She was the perfect scapegoat. Lucia downloaded the real ledgers onto an encrypted flash drive, slipping the silver metal into her bra. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs as she grabbed her heavy leather tote bag and hurried toward the elevators. The building was empty, the silence oppressive. She rode the elevator down to the sub-basement parking garage. The air down here was thick with the smell of exhaust and damp concrete. Her sensible block heels echoed too loudly in the cavernous space. She kept her keys woven between her fingers, a makeshift weapon she hoped she would never have to use. She reached her 10-year-old sedan, her hand trembling as she unlocked the door. A heavy hand slammed the car door shut before she could pull it open. Lucia gasped, spinning around. Two men boxed her in. They wore dark, tactical jackets, their faces devoid of any emotion. One was tall with a jagged scar cutting through his left eyebrow. The other was stocky, holding a suppressed pistol with casual expertise. Kessler's men. Well, well, the tall one sneered, looking her up and down with cruel amusement. The boss said you were a big girl, but I did not think you would be this easy to catch. Hand over the drive, sweetheart. Lucia pressed her back against the cold metal of her car. Her breath plumed in the chilly air, but she refused to let them see her break. She was terrified. Yes, but beneath the soft exterior beat the heart of a survivor who had fought for every scrap of respect she had ever earned. I do not know what you are talking about, Lucia said, keeping her voice remarkably steady. The stocky man chuckled, raising the gun and pressing the cold barrel directly against her cheek. Do not play stupid. Kessler wants the drive, and then he wants you in the trunk. Let us make this easy. You are too soft for this world, honey. You cannot fight us. Adrenaline, pure and sharp, flooded Lucia's veins. They thought she was weak because she was full-figured. They thought she was slow. Lucia did not scream. She acted. With a violent twist of her torso, she swung her heavy leather tote bag upward, the brass buckles smashing directly into the stocky man's face. The gun fired with a muffled cough, the bullet burying itself harmlessly into the concrete ceiling as the man stumbled backward, blood erupting from his nose. Simultaneously, Lucia lunged at the tall man, driving her keys hard toward his neck. He deflected her arm at the last second, but the jagged metal tore a deep gash across his collarbone. He roared in pain and backhanded her. The force sent Lucia crashing onto the hood of her car, her head spinning, stars dancing in her vision. The tall man drew his own weapon, his eyes wild with fury. "You stupid bitch! You're going to die right here!" Lucia scrambled backward, gasping for air, her mind racing for a way out. There was nowhere to run. The stocky man was recovering, raising his weapon again. She braced herself for the end. Then the shadows came alive. A sleek black Lincoln Continental slid out from behind a concrete pillar, its headlights blinding the two hitmen. Before the car even rolled to a complete stop, the rear passenger door flew open. A man stepped into the harsh fluorescent light, Nicolo Serra. Even in the dim garage, his presence was a physical weight, commanding and terrifying. As the undisputed head of the Serra Syndicate, the most powerful faction of the Chicago outfit, Nicolo was a phantom of violence and absolute control. He wore a dark, bespoke suit that stretched over broad, dangerous shoulders. His face was a mask of aristocratic cruelty, high cheekbones and a strong jaw set in stone. His dark eyes locked entirely on the men threatening Lucia. The two hitmen froze, the color draining from their faces. "Serra," the tall one whispered, lowering his gun a fraction of an inch. "This is Kessler's business. Back off." Nicolo did not speak. He moved with terrifying, lethal grace. In one fluid motion, he drew a sleek handgun from his shoulder holster and fired twice. Two suppressed coughs echoed in the garage. The tall man dropped instantly, a neat hole perfectly centered in his forehead. The stocky man screamed, raising his gun toward Nicolo, but he never even pulled the trigger. Nicolo closed the distance in two massive strides, knocking the gun away with his left hand while driving his own weapon under the man's chin. He fired once. The man collapsed in a lifeless heap. The entire violently choreographed sequence took less than 4 seconds. Lucia sat frozen on the hood of her car, her chest heaving, staring at the carnage. Nicolo Serra slowly lowered his weapon. He did not look at the bodies. He turned his dark, predatory gaze slowly toward her. Silence descended upon the concrete tomb, broken only by the hum of the overhead lights and Lucia's ragged breathing. Nicolo holstered his weapon, his eyes never leaving her face. He stepped over the dead hitmen as if they were nothing more than discarded trash. As he approached, Lucia's survival instincts screamed at her to run. This was Nicolo Serra, the man who had single-handedly orchestrated the Valentine's Eve massacre of the Russian mob 3 years ago. He was a monster wrapped in expensive wool and silk. Yet her legs refused to move. She felt pinned to the spot, entirely captivated by the intense, burning focus in his eyes. He stopped inches away from her. Up close, he was devastatingly handsome, smelling of gunpowder, winter air, and expensive bergamot. He reached out slowly, his large, calloused hand hovering just a breath away from the red mark on her cheek where the hitman had struck her. "Are you badly hurt, Lucia?" His voice was a low, rough rumble that vibrated right through her chest. It was not a question of polite concern. It was a demand for facts. He knew her name. I am fine," she stammered, her voice trembling despite her best efforts. "How do you know my name?" Nicolo's fingers finally made contact with her skin. His touch was shockingly gentle, tracing the curve of her jaw with a possessive reverence that sent a shiver down her spine. "I know everything about you, Mia Cara. I know you prefer vanilla in your coffee. I know you stay late every Friday to fix your incompetent boss's mistakes. And I know you just stole Roland Kessler's most prized ledger." Lucia's eyes went wide. "You have been watching me." Nicolo did not deny it. His gaze dropped briefly to the generous curve of her hips, then back to her eyes, his expression darkening with an unmistakable fierce hunger. "I have been watching you for months, waiting for the right moment to pull you out of that pathetic life. Kessler's men just forced my hand early." He slid his hand to the back of her neck, his thumb resting over her pulse point. It was beating wildly against his skin. "You were incredibly brave just now. I watched you fight them. You are as beautiful as you are fierce." Lucia felt a hot flush rise to her cheeks. She was not used to men like him looking at her like this. Men in power usually wanted the size 0 models, the rail-thin socialites with hollow cheekbones. But Niccolo was looking at her full, soft figure as if she were a Renaissance masterpiece, as if he wanted to devour her and worship her all at once. "Come with me," Niccolo commanded, stepping back and gesturing toward the waiting Lincoln. His driver, a hulking man in a dark suit, had already opened the door. "Already saw." "I need to go home," Lucia said, though she knew how foolish it sounded. "My apartment." "If you go to your apartment, you will be dead before sunrise," Niccolo interrupted, his tone turning to steel. "Roland Kessler knows you have the drive. He will send an army of skinheads to tear your life apart. Your boss sold you out to save his own miserable skin. You have nowhere else to go." He stepped closer again, his presence entirely enveloping her. "You are coming with me, Lucia, because I am the only man in Chicago who can protect you, and because I refuse to let anyone else have you. You belong to me now." The raw, possessive certainty in his voice left no room for argument. And a dark, secret part of Lucia, the part that was tired of being alone, tired of fighting for survival in a world that ignored her, thrilled at his words. She reached into her bra, pulling out the warm silver flash drive, and held it out to him. "Is this what you want?" she asked, testing him. Niccolo looked at the drive, then back at her face. He did not take it. "Keep it. The drive is just leverage. What I want is the woman holding it." Without another word, he placed his hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward the Lincoln. Lucia climbed into the luxurious leather interior, her heavy tote bag clutched to her chest. Niccolo slid in beside her, the door shutting with a heavy, final thud that sealed her fate. The car sped out of the garage, leaving the bodies behind. They drove north toward the Gold Coast, the neon lights of the city streaking across the tinted windows. The silence in the back of the car was heavy with unspoken tension. Lucia felt the heat radiating from Niccolo's massive frame. He sat close, entirely too close, his thigh brushing against hers. "Why me?" Lucia finally whispered, staring out the window at the icy waters of Lake Michigan. "I am just a logistics assistant. I am not a model. I am not a part of your world." Niccolo shifted, his arm coming to rest on the seat behind her shoulders. He reached out, taking a thick lock of her dark hair and rubbing the strands between his fingers. "Because you are real, Lucia. In a world full of plastic and deceit, you are solid, brilliant, and completely authentic. You survived Kessler's wolves with nothing but a handbag and your car keys. Do you have any idea how intoxicating that is to a man like me?" He leaned in, his lips brushing against her ear. "You have always been a queen, Mia cara. You just needed a king ruthless enough to build you a throne." Ooh. They pulled up to a heavily guarded skyscraper overlooking the lake. Men armed with automatic rifles patrolled the perimeter. This was the fortress of the Serra Syndicate. As they rode the private elevator up to the penthouse, Lucia realized she had traded one nightmare for another, vastly different reality. She was no longer running from hitmen. She was stepping directly into the lion's den. The elevator doors chimed and parted, revealing an opulent, sprawling penthouse bathed in shadows and city lights. Niccolo led her inside, stripping off his suit jacket and tossing it onto a velvet sofa. The silver gun in his shoulder holster glinted in the dim light. "Make yourself at home, Lucia," Niccolo said, walking over to a crystal decanter and pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid. "We have a lot of work to do. Kessler will realize his men are dead within the hour. We are going to war." Lucia took the glass he offered, her fingers brushing his. "And my role in this war," Niccolo smiled, a dark, dangerous curving of his lips that made her stomach do a slow, heavy flip. "You are going to help me dismantle Roland Kessler's empire, dollar by dollar, using that brilliant mind of yours. And in return, I am going to give you everything you have ever been denied." He stepped into her personal space, gently taking the glass from her trembling hands and setting it aside. His hands gripped her waist, his thumbs tracing the soft curve of her stomach through her silk blouse. He pulled her flush against his hard body. "But first," Niccolo murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips, "I am going to show you exactly how a woman like you is supposed to be touched." Lucia gasped as his mouth captured hers. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a claiming, filled with all the violence, passion, and dark obsession he had been harboring for months. The Mafia boss had finally caught his prize, and as Lucia sank into his brutal, intoxicating embrace, she knew her old life was gone forever. The underworld had just claimed her, and God help her, she never wanted to leave. The next 3 days inside the Serra penthouse were a whirlwind of shifting realities. To the outside world, Lucia Barbieri was a missing person, a low-level employee who had vanished after a late night at the office. To the underworld, she was the key to the Iron Cross Syndicate's ruin. Niccolo Serra did not treat her like a prisoner. He treated her like a precious, volatile asset. He gave her access to the secure network in his study, a room lined with floor-to-ceiling glass that looked out over the sprawling, icy expanse of Chicago. Lucia sat at the mahogany desk, her fingers flying across the keys as she decrypted the files she had stolen from Roland Kessler. She was in her element. Her plus-size frame, which had always made her feel like she took up too much space in a crowded office, felt powerful here, anchored in the heavy leather chair. Niccolo often stood behind her, his large hands resting on the back of the chair, his presence a constant, grounding weight. He would lean down, his chin brushing her shoulder as he watched the numbers flicker by, his breath hot against her skin. "You are faster than my best analyst," Niccolo noted, his voice a low rumble. "I am used to cleaning up messes," Lucia replied, not breaking her rhythm. "Your embezzlers are sloppy. Kessler's are even worse." She felt Niccolo smile against her neck. It was a terrifying realization. She enjoyed this. She enjoyed the adrenaline of the digital hunt, and she enjoyed the way Niccolo looked at her. Not as an object to be discarded, but as a partner to be feared and revered. The peace was shattered on the 4th night. They were sharing a late dinner, the city lights shimmering below, when the security alarms began to shriek. It was not a fire alarm, it was a perimeter breach. Niccolo was moving before the sound even fully registered. He pulled a submachine gun from a hidden compartment behind a portrait of a Renaissance saint. He turned to Lucia, his eyes hard and focused. "Get into the panic room behind the library. Do not come out until I give the order. Do not trust anyone but me." He didn't wait for her reply. He was gone, his footsteps silent on the marble floor as he barked orders into his comms. Lucia did not head for the panic room. She grabbed the encrypted laptop, knowing that if Kessler wanted anything, It was the digital trail she had uncovered. She retreated to the library, pressing her back against the bookshelves. Outside, the sounds of war erupted. The distinct, rhythmic thud of heavy gunfire and the shattering of reinforced glass echoed through the penthouse. Kessler had come for her himself. She peered through the crack of the library door. She saw shadows moving in the hallway, men in tactical gear swarming the foyer. Niccolo was a blur of violence, returning fire with lethal precision. He moved with a calculated, cold efficiency that made her realize he was not just a boss, he was a predator. One of Kessler's men, a massive brute of a man with a tattoo of an iron cross on his neck, bypassed the main skirmish and headed straight for the library. Lucia's heart hammered against her ribs. She was unarmed, but she was not defenseless. She remembered the rage she felt in the parking garage. She reached out and grabbed a heavy, bronze bust of a Roman emperor from the shelf. As the man kicked the door open, he scanned the room, his weapon raised. He didn't see her behind the door. Lucia stepped out, every ounce of her frustration and fear channeled into her arms. She swung the bronze bust with all her strength, catching the man squarely on the temple. He crumpled like a broken doll, his gun clattering to the floor. Lucia didn't hesitate. She snatched up his pistol, the weight of the steel cold and familiar in her hand. She stepped into the hallway, moving with a desperate, sharp intent. She saw Niccolo engaged in a fierce firefight near the grand staircase. He was pinned down, his ammo running low. Without thinking, she raised the gun. She took a breath, centered her aim, and fired 2 shots at the man aiming for Niccolo's blind spot. The man dropped. Niccolo spun around, his eyes locking onto hers. For a split second, there was no gunfire, no war. Only the absolute terrifying connection between them. He saw her, the girl he had plucked from obscurity, standing amidst the blood and smoke, holding a weapon she knew how to use. He looked at her with a fierce, burning pride that took her breath away. The battle for the penthouse was short, brutal, and entirely controlled by the Serra Syndicate. By the time the dust settled, Kessler's men were dead or retreating, and the hallways were stained with the cost of the night. Niccolo walked toward her, his shirt torn, a graze on his cheek bleeding slightly. He didn't check his own wounds. He reached out and gently took the gun from Lucia's hands, setting it on a nearby table. He pulled her into his arms, his embrace crushing, desperate, and possessive. "You were not supposed to be out here," he whispered, his forehead pressed against hers. "I am not a damsel," Lucia said, her voice shaking but defiant. "I told you, I am a survivor." Niccolo chuckled, a dark, rich sound that seemed out of place in the carnage. "You are the most dangerous woman I have ever met, Lucia Barbieri. And you are mine." He didn't wait for a response. He picked her up, carrying her through the chaos of the foyer toward their private quarters. The world outside was in flames. Kessler's empire would be picked apart by the authorities because of the files Lucia had helped secure. But inside the master suite, the world shrunk down to just the 2 of them. He set her down on the edge of the bed and knelt before her, his eyes dark with an intensity that burned hotter than any fire. He reached out, his hands traveling the curves of her body, with a reverence that felt like a sacred ritual. He didn't care about the fashion of the world or the expectations of his peers. He saw her, the strength of her, the resilience of her, the way she had carved a space for herself in a world that wanted to crush her. "I will burn every city to the ground before I let anyone touch you again," Niccolo promised, his voice a vow whispered against her skin. Lucia looked at the man who had claimed her, the ruthless king of the underworld. She realized that she hadn't just been rescued. She had found her match. She reached out, running her fingers through his dark hair, pulling him closer. "Then show me," she whispered. The night stretched on, a blur of passion and the heavy, quiet peace of two monsters who had finally found the only thing in the world worth protecting. By dawn, the news began to spread. The Iron Cross Syndicate had been dismantled, its leadership dead or in federal custody, thanks to the leak that originated from the Serra penthouse. Niccolo Serra was now the undisputed king of the city, and standing right beside him, with a steel-sharp mind and a heart of ice, was the assistant who had refused to be a victim. Lucia didn't look back at the life she had once known, the coffee runs, the invisible hours, the constant dismissal. She wore the ring Niccolo had placed on her finger, a dark, heavy band of black diamonds, a symbol of her new life. She wasn't just an assistant anymore. She was the shadow behind the throne, the woman who commanded the respect of the most dangerous men in the country. They were cornered once by hitmen who thought they could break the world. But they had underestimated the woman who knew how to turn the tables, and they had certainly underestimated the man who would tear down heaven and hell to keep her. In the heart of Chicago, in the highest tower, the Mafia Boss and his queen watched the sun rise over the city they now ruled, knowing that together they were untouchable. If this dark, high-stakes tale of power, betrayal, and unexpected love kept you on the edge of your seat, then you need to make sure you do not miss what happens next in our series. Did you love the tension between Lucia and Niccolo? Let us know in the comments below which part of their story shocked you the most. Like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a beat of the underworld.